There are tools and instruments that almost every Android developer uses almost every day. You probably start with your IDE, and after writing some code, switch to a command to run your application. And somehow your APK is uploaded to the device, and it starts. And another day, you go a bit deeper to what is happening. You discover that there is some command which is called ADB and stands for Android Debug Bridge. And you learned something that you actually can get a list of connected devices with a simple ADB devices command. And then you start thinking that you probably can do something useful and probably automate a lot of stuff. One day I thought about the case that, wow, I have a set of automated tests for our app. I would like to have a machine that I can connect a new device to and then have all the tests run on it automatically, just when I plug it. And then you face with the task that you have to detect the event that you plug the device. You have to identify what the device is plugged. You have to connect to it and start your tests. And you kind of start solving it, probably with the same ADB device command. You start thinking how to react on some USB event. But then you come back to thinking that, hey, when you open the Android Studio, yeah, and you start this run interface, you know that they display a set of devices that are connected to your machine. And they update this list in real time. And you doubt that they actually invoke ADB device every 5 seconds or so. You start thinking that, hey, these guys know some magic that I do not understand. We use the tools because they work for us, work perfectly, they solve our tasks. But sometimes you get a feeling that there is something that you want to know more. And then you continue your development. Probably the thought comes to you every morning, probably not. But then you probably take a look at what other people do. And you're faced with a tool which is developed by Facebook and is called Stata. A brilliant tool. You probably can raise your hand if you use it, and I believe that you'll find some people here. No? Then I think it will not be a waste of time to demonstrate what it does. So the tool basically makes it possible for you to integrate your application with Chrome development tools. A lot of web engineers and front-end engineers in web technologies love these tools because they use to intercept different requests that come in from the browser to the backend. They are used to see the views hierarchy. It's in our terms, or HTML structure in their terms, and they just love it. And Facebook made a tool that can integrate your application with DevTools. So it looks like you can open a Chrome window, go to Chrome Inspect tab, and you'll see your device in this list. And if your application has this tool used as a library, you'll see your app in this list, like this one, Constant command line. You can click on Inspect, and let me try to reconnect. And you will see the standard dev tools that web engineers use, but it will work with your application. Let's take a look at our app. We can see the structure of views, and it works just like it works for web developer. Yeah, you can see how the layout is structured, and the views will be highlighted when you brought the hierarchy. It will provide you the same ability to intercept network requests and to see the details. And you even get an ability to script some interaction with your app using some JavaScript. They basically give you an ability to embed Rhino JavaScript interpreter in your application, and then you can you type JavaScript here, and it will be executed on your device. And integration is really simple. For basic integration, all you need to do is just one single line of code. And at this point, you think again. Google knows some magic. Facebook knows some magic. Why do not I know this magic? And you start wondering how to get this knowledge. So, are you ready for the journey? I hope so. Let's take a look at the stator. They do not only provide the integration with development tools, they also provide a script which is called dump app. Dump app basically allows you to talk to your application from the command line. It is organized like a set of plugins that you can extend from your application, providing your specific application logic. But by default, you have a set of plugins that can be viewed with the list command, and you will see that you can, for instance, browse all the files that are present in your application sandbox. Or you can actually even modify your shared preferences, like this simple command. Or print the shared preferences and see what is stored there. So let's start our journey from analyzing the script. If you take a look at it, you will find that there is a file which is called stator open. And if you look at this file, you will find that it somehow connects to a port. It opens a TCP connection on port 5037 on your local host. And now you realize that, hey, on my machine, some server is running. Let's prove it. Let's take a look at what is actually running on my machine and whether this port is open. And you will see that it is actually open. You will see the line that there is a server which listens for incoming connection on this port. You will see that Android Studio connects to this port. And you will see that actually Google Chrome connects to this port. And you understand that this is how they all do this magic. Let's continue. But how? After this point, I personally looked at Android source code. Fortunately, this part of Android internals is documented much better than the rest. And you will find out that there is a special protocol for ADB. And Android debug bridge is not called the bridge just for the joke sake. It's actually the bridge. So what happens? On our machine, we have a server, an ADB server running on the port. Then on the device, we have what is called an ADB daemon. If you go to the device via ADB shell, you will be able to see it in the list of processes. You will see that there is an ADB daemon which is run as a shell user on the device. So, and after you look at the documentation, you will figure out that this daemon provides what is called a set of services that the server can connect to. So examples of these services include invoking shell commands or connecting to a local socket, or actually to a TCP socket. This means that communication works like the following. Your client is either ADB or dump amp in the case of Facebook Stator, or Android Studio, talks to ADB server, and since ADB server can be connected to multiple devices, it instructs him that the client wants to talk to some specific device. When you specify the device, you send another command which instructs what service on that device you want to communicate with. And in case of Stator, it is a command to connect to a local socket, which is open by your own application when you embed that library into your application. So when your process is started, the socket is up, and then the script can establish a connection between your machine and your application. The last thing that I do not understand is how this client can understand what actually socket it should connect to, because it have to discover this socket to identify it with some name. But this is actually solved rather easily. You can go to the device and list all the open sockets, all the local sockets on the device, just viewing the file which is called procnet Unix. And now just let's grab with the word remote. You will see that there are sockets with their special naming. So everything that ends with the DevTools remote is handled by Chrome tools as a client that the server that they connect to. And what Chrome does and what Stator dump app client does is listing these open sockets, figuring out what they can connect to, and start communication. In case of Chrome DevTools, they start actually an HTTP connection and use WebSockets in order to get a lot of the data from the application, and then render that view hierarchy and intercept network requests and so on. And in case of dump app, they look at sockets with their Stator prefix and can send their own commands in order to communicate with the plugins that you define in your application. So now we feel better. Now we understand the magic. And actually, having this knowledge, we can think about another case, how we can use it. And if you combine it with the recent Android API that allow you to obtain media projection, render it to virtual display, and then encode it, and then transmit using this ADB connection, you will get a solution that I'm currently using to stream the device picture to, for you, which is called Visor. I'm not a Visor author, but having this knowledge, I can guess that it's actually what they do. But this is this was just about what we can do and what inspiration we can get and what instruments we can build with this knowledge. In practice, I have experience with using this communication with the device actually that helped me. But it is a bit different from establishing a socket actual connection and have a two-way communication. And is more bit trivial. And purely relies on ADB shell abilities. So when we use ADB shell, the picture actually is absolutely the same. We just have ADB as a client that talks to ADB server that establishes connection to ADB daemon and uses its shell service in order to invoke the commands. Note that it is because ADB daemon runs as a shell user, we always get this shell user permissions when we type ADB shell. And when we do it, we can do something more than a regular application can do. Because every application on Android runs as a specific user and have a restricted set of permissions that they can use. And shell user has a much wider set of permissions. For instance, shell user can inject different events for other applications. It's not what you can do from, for example, from custom application, you can't inject events to Google Inbox. But the shell user can do it. He is allowed. Now we can use ADB shell to actually communicate with the device and with your application. Let's start with the simple examples of how we can turn the screen on. If we type a key, if we use an input command in which is available in Android shell, then we can use code 4 for simulating the back button press. Fortunately, it reacts and actually switches the screen on, but I have to unlock it, sorry. We can inject command 3 in order to navigate to the home screen. And we can use a command which is called dumpsys to communicate to different services that run in Android system. It's just like when you talk to these services via SDK using some alarm manager class, you talk to alarm service. When you use context start activity, you talk to activity service. We can do rather similar things using dumpsys. So when we call dumpsys activity, we talk to activity service, and to see what you can do, you can type -h and get a brief picture of available commands. The most useful for me is dumpsys activity top. It will provide us information about the activity which is on the top of the task stack. If you take a look at its output, you will think, oh my God, it's just something absolutely unreadable. But let's take a closer look. So at the beginning, we see the package name of this activity. This is launcher. And note that its package name is not actually called launcher, it's Google Quick Search Box. Probably if you stay with Android for a number of years, you remember this application in Google Play. Do you? Probably you do. Now we know what happens to that application. And probably what can happen to your application. You can absolutely rename it and give absolutely different vibe. But the package name is the same, and it was just updated. And then you can see the view hierarchy, the dump of view hierarchy of this activity. For the launcher, it's pretty impressive and rather long. What is interesting is that you will also see a lot of additional debugging information. Let's just search because it's... No. You will see the title debug logs. I will share with you that this part is not something standard. By default, if you dump another activity, actually let's try to do it, you will not see this information. This information is explicitly written by the launcher activity when we talk to it and request the dump. For instance, if we try to start another activity, let's try the inbox activity. This is done with the AM command, which is actually Activity Manager Client. I just instructed to start a new activity. And then we request its dump. Let's copy the activity name and do the dump. After the view arc, you will not see anything similar to that. So it gives us a clue that your activity can actually customly process this request, this dump request. And this is true. Let's start my own custom activity. Okay. So AM command supports starting both activities, services, and sending broadcast receivers, broadcast to broadcast receivers. You actually can also use it to send queries to content providers. So now if we take a look at my activity and also request its dump. It's now top, so let's do top. You will see that my activity writes that there are possible commands that we can pass to it. Let's try it and see what happens. So we can see that activity actually can react on what we type and does it pretty well. Let's get it back. And if you take a look at the code that implements all this stuff, you will find that it's very simple. Basically, almost every component in your application, like activity, service, or content provider, has the method which is called dump, which can be overridden. And this is the method which is called by activity service when you communicate to it and request the dump. And in the parameters of this method, you get actually the output that you can write to. And in the bottom, you will see that if no arguments are passed, I will just display a small help. And if there are some arguments in the input, I would try to interpret them. We use this in practice when we were tuning a blurring approach, blurring algorithm that was used to dynamically generate the background of our application. And we just wanted to try it on different pictures, so we just implemented a small piece of code that could download any picture by URL, and while submitting this URL via these commands, and then in real time we saw how it was blurred and how it looked like. Another use case you can imagine is when you can actually have real-time conversation with some designer, and this will give you an ability to try something in real time. Actually, absolutely the same thing can be done with the service. The service also has a dump method, and we can use just a bit of different variation of AM command line in order to talk to it. So I just can type start service and specify the name of my service. This will start my service, and I will be able to request its dump in a similar way. I forgot about activity word. Yeah, the service supports a custom action which is called state, which will toggle this which will toggle this state to an opposite value. And this can be used when you have some service which works with some background task and you just want at random time to see what the state they are in. Like dumping your queue state and analyzing what is happening there. So the bottom line is that communicating with your application is not that hard, and now we know the magic and know what happens behind the scenes. I hope that it gives you some inspiration for probably better development tools, or probably for something that will help you with your life. I'm open to discussions, and thank you for your attention. On the slides that will be published after the conference, you'll see some references. This is linked to ADB documentation that you can analyze and see how to implement this connection to your app. And I highly recommend Embedded Android book, which is not mine, but I enjoyed reading it. It has a lot of information about dump sys commands and other stuff that happens in Android internals and how you can use them. Thank you again.
When you have access to the network logging with Esteto, does it bypass SSL and any kind of encryption, or you still have to install a custom certificate like in Charles Proxy?
The thing is that it doesn't work like Charles or Proxy or anything else. The integration is done customly for every way you perform your network operations. They have custom integration for URL connection, custom integration for OKHTTP, and it basically works like taking the input that you pass to the framework and rendering it to the view you see in Chrome DevTools. So it doesn't require any additional moves to unencrypt something or actually work with the traffic. It's just your input that you provide to the libraries over the framework, and it is rendered in the tools.
Cool.
Also the output from the network.
Yeah, including the output.
And the other
actually, anything that your application has access to.
Yeah, so it's an interceptor for OKHTTP or the equivalent.
Exactly.
The other question is, you showed the JavaScript console, and that was really, really nice. And then there was no demo. It's like, I want to see what you can do with that.
Yeah, because I actually wanted to concentrate on a bit different thing. Mainly, you can what you can do is import some variables and actually, for instance, application context. If you want to work with an activity, it will become a bit more complex, because basically when you set up all this data tool, you do it usually in your application class, and which automatically makes it a bit difficult to deal with activities and other components that have some different life cycle from your process. And but with some tricks you can achieve that if you need that. I personally didn't.
Thank you.
Very nice presentation. I have a question about the events. You write the event. You write the events clicking. We can define the events like clicking on the X and Y axis and working with buttons and keys, etc. Yeah. But if we do swiping, for example, and pinching on the screen, it's a very lot actions in a console. True. Yeah, and on the Stack Overflow, it's any easy option to do defined swipe by, for example, X and Y axis. The only one solution is the record your finger
actual
move
gesture,
and the
and then replay it.
Yeah. Do you know any libraries to do it easier?
No, unfortunately, I do not. Actually, I remember that some time ago, the Emulator included an application which was called Gesture Detector, and probably it can help, but I didn't do it and can't help. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks.